Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for March 17th, 2022. What I want to discuss today is that the economic collapse is now hitting home. Yesterday I reviewed the interrelationship between the war drive and the attempt to economically destroy Russia and the global systemic collapse of the financial system of the Western world. The economic warfare aimed at Russia has a specific intent. It's not about freedom for the Ukrainian people. It's not about sovereignty of Ukraine. The West doesn't care about that. If it did, it wouldn't have run a coup in Ukraine in February 2014. It's about protecting the financial holdings and the financial system that benefits handfuls of billionaires and corporate cartels in the West. And the Ukrainian people are being used as cannon fodder against Russia. The deeper issue, as we've been pointing out, is the Russia-China-Eurasian integration. Will Europe go along? There are many people in Europe who are attracted to the idea of expanding trade with Russia and joining China's Belt and Road Initiative. If that happened, the Great Reset would be done. It would never occur. The globalist elite would see their looting system disappear, their banks and corporations go under into bankruptcy reorganization, and their paper finances and fortunes go up in smoke. So that's the process that's moving along at rapid speed. Now, you're not being told this in the Western media for obvious reasons, because they're trying to play on your heartstrings about the courageous Ukrainian people who are being targeted by the despotic Putin. But the reality is that this is increasingly recognized by those same elites that they're about to lose everything. On March 16th, a $115 million interest payment on foreign-held Russian debt came due. Due to the freeze by sanctions and theft of the Russian assets, over $300 billion worth in U.S. banks, the Russians ended up paying in rubles. And those rubles cannot be exchanged for the dollars held in those banks because the banks have frozen it. So Russia now enters a 30-day grace period. If those funds are not unfrozen, Russia will be declared in default. Now, the London Guardian, long a mouthpiece for the City of London, issued a warning. They said this default will guarantee, quote, that a full-blown collapse is almost inevitable, unquote, in Russia. But the reality of this is there's a boomerang effect, which means it will hit the West as well. The Russians have already enacted an export ban on many productive goods and industrial products. This could be extended to oil and gas and grain. Russia is the world's largest wheat exporter. If Russia held back oil and gas and its grain, the prices, which are already skyrocketing, would become unaffordable. Now, this was recognized by a columnist for the Financial Times. Remember, the Financial Times is a paper which covers the view of the world from the City of London. And in this article, the Financial Times op-ed writer wrote, "Be under no illusion. Russians will not be the only ones to suffer under Russian sanctions. The world should remember Lehman and brace for a global financial and economic shock." Lehman was the first bank that went into bankruptcy in 2008 in September and nearly triggered a collapse of the U.S. banking system. And the reaction to Lehman was the huge bailout, which continues until this day, of pumping tens of trillions of dollars of funny money, fiat currency, into the banking system and the insurance companies and the hedge funds and private equity funds to buy and sell worthless financial instruments to keep the asset value on the books at face value or higher. They make money every time there's a trade, but that doesn't mean these are solvent instruments. They're worthless. And this is where the inflation comes from. So the Financial Times says that the potential impact from Russian sanctions, which they say could lead to a Lehman moment, is not yet, quote, fully acknowledged. Well, the problem the financial oligarchy has is that their plans have been shattered by the fact that they cannot control Russia and China. They intended to have the Great Reset in place already, either to allow an orderly transition or to be able to control things when the shock hit. They would pay down the debts they have with cheap dollars and meanwhile control all the financial, trade, and spending by eliminating sovereign governments and putting the world under a global central banker dictatorship. That was the plan of the Great Reset. The problem is that resistance is growing to that Great Reset, centered around Russia and China, which will not give up their sovereignty. Now, Putin issued a statement yesterday addressing this potential for the global crash that's coming. I'm going to read part of it to you because you're never going to be allowed to hear this or see this in the Western media. The media is calling Putin a dictator, a despot. Biden yesterday called him a war criminal. Joe, if you want to see a war criminal, look in the mirror. Look what you did in supporting the invasions of Afghanistan, of Iraq, the overthrow of the government in Libya, the attacks on the Syrian government, the sanctions that are killing children in Yemen and that are still killing many, many millions or threatening to kill millions in Afghanistan. That's a war criminal. Meanwhile, Putin is trying to address a situation where the Russians are being made the scapegoat for the collapse of the Western economy. So I want you to listen to what Putin said after he met yesterday to discuss the socioeconomic support for the Russian regions under the crisis conditions of sanctions. He directly addressed the people in the West, and here's what he said. These are quotes. "I want ordinary Western people to hear me too. You are being persistently told that your current difficulties are the result of Russia's hostile actions and that you have to pay for the efforts to counter the alleged Russian threat from your own pockets. All of that is a lie. The truth is that the problems faced by millions of people in the West are the result of many years of actions by the ruling elite of your respective countries, their mistakes, and short-sighted policies and ambitions. This elite is not thinking about how to improve the lives of their citizens in Western countries. They are obsessed with their own self-serving interests and super profits." I'm continuing to quote from Putin's talk yesterday. He said, "To reiterate, the whole planet is now paying for the West's ambitions and the West's attempts to maintain its elusive dominance by any means possible. Imposing sanctions is the logical continuation and the distillation of the irresponsible and short-sighted policy of the US and EU countries' governments and central banks. They themselves have driven up global inflation in recent years, and with their actions caused rising global poverty and greater inequality across the world. The question now arises, who will answer for the millions who will die of hunger in the world's poorest countries due to the growing food shortages? Let me reiterate," he concluded, "the global economy and global trade as a whole have suffered a major blow, as did trust in the US dollar as the main reserve currency," unquote. The latter statement is very significant because Putin is referring to moves by Russia and China and other countries to set up an alternative to the SWIFT financial transaction system and possibly to the petrodollar system itself. It was announced 2 days ago that the Saudis will now accept Chinese yuan for payment in their oil exports to China, which means that the petrodollar system as a whole is now coming into question. And as Putin pointed out, if you start sanctioning countries and stealing their dollar holdings in Western banks, why should countries trust Western banks? Why should they be engaged in a financial system that steals from them, steals from the poorest, from their people, takes the food out of their mouths, the medicine away from their stores, all for the benefit of handfuls of billionaires who control the military-industrial complex and dictate the financial and military strategic policies of Western countries. That's where we are in the world today, where the crisis has come to a head. The question is, will the Americans respond to what Putin is saying? Will they even hear it? I'm asking you to share this video as widely as possible, to talk to people you know. You can go to the Kremlin website, kremlin.ru events/president/news. I'll put the link at the bottom of the description. So you can go and read for yourself. Don't take my word for it or even Putin's word for it. Think, discuss, investigate. And then once you find out that we are right, because I know we are, go out and organize and join us in organizing for a conference that will take up the question of the real security needs for the world's population and the connection of that to the financial needs. We don't need a great reset. We need a revival of American system economic policies, a joining with the Belt and Road Initiative, a major cooperative venture of the whole world, because development is the name of peace. So thanks for joining me. Tomorrow's Friday. I'll take your questions. You can send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. And I appreciate the interaction I'm getting with a growing number of you. But share this video, get this story out. Let's make sure we can win this fight.